Welcome to Better, the podcast about doing better, being better, and leaving the world a better place than we found it. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Better, do better, be better, make the world a better place. Jay here as always, and this is a two-part interview segment that I have for you guys, but a couple housekeeping items to get out of the way. First, betterpodcast.live. That is our website. I don't link to all the socials and everything here. Just go to that link. It's the only link you need. Every single feed from Spotify to Apple to iHeartRadio to YouTube, our social media, everything's there. And we recently switched over from my social media to a better social media and being better the brand. So trying to grow that right now. So I'd really appreciate the follows, the likes, the comments, the shares, and all that. As well, not really into the theme, but this is the first time I just got this in hand a couple days ago. My book, The Last First Date, based loosely on the reality of how I met my girlfriend. And there are lessons in here. And you will probably, if you have been checking out this podcast for a while, you will probably notice that several of the things I've talked about on the podcast are in this book, The Last First Date. Amazon. Comes out March 1st, but it's for pre-order ebook right now. I really tried to write, it's a contemporary romance, but it's a contemporary romance with kind of like a commentary on dating, online dating, doing better in relationships, those sorts of things. So when Sean and I met, we went through this whole journey of realizing that it took us this long to find each other because of the fact we had to learn a lot of lessons the hard way to get to the point where we could be people that could complement each other. So Last First Date, Amazon. If you're in Winnipeg, February 16th, we're having a release party at Hermanos. It's going to be a really cool night, a night you're not going to really expect. It's also a celebration of love because it's like 2 days after Valentine's Day. So because Hermanos is kind of the premier date destination in Winnipeg, we're blending the two. So if you're a guy that has, or I guess a female, but it's more common in guys' cases. If you're a guy who has kind of ignored Valentine's Day over the years, now you can do Valentine's Day, have great steak, come to a book release, see a great comedian, hear me read a book because that's entertaining somehow. And we got lots of good literary games and literary menus, lots of surprises, special guests, things like that. So if you want tickets to that, just shoot me a message and I'll make sure you get tickets to that. Trying to keep it outside of the 5 to 100% fees on ticketing sites and just doing it all myself. So message me for that. Now, the website, the book, the release date. Let's move on. This podcast is all about people doing better in life. If it's a solo episode, I'm talking about all the things I've learned along the way. When I have a guest, it's all about learning what they have learned all along the way. And my guest today has had an interesting story, a story filled with trauma, a story filled with a lot of learning the hard way, just like many of us. But perseverance, resiliency, it's all part of Mariah's story. Mariah, how are you?
Hello, I am good. It's so good to hear your part of the story too. It was awesome. I love it.
Yeah, it's I started this podcast because when I was in nightclubs, I started as a DJ when I was really young, and then I got into nightclubs, and a few things along the way really started to bother me. Mm-hmm. I became almost not in everything, but when it came to my job and everything, almost a pathological liar because that's how everybody was.
Yeah.
And I started to become okay with. I started to know bad people doing bad things, and I was kind of like, that's not my business to get involved.
Right. Yeah.
And it really was. So once I kind of woke up one day in a panic, we'll say a quarter life crisis, and I quit it all. And I completely changed everything about my life. And then I did a former podcast, which got kind of negative because it was right on COVID, and it became about COVID, and that was very polarizing. So I stopped that. I met my girlfriend and she's like, I loved your podcast. So she encouraged me to do a new podcast. And I was like, well, I don't want to do anything negative. So here we are at Better. That's kind of how it all happened. So
that's a perfect name too.
yeah, it's simple, easy to remember, right?
Yeah.
Not great for your Google ranking, considering the fact you put in Better and it comes up with about 1 billion search results before me. But
I think of BetterHelp, like whatever. I hear the word better.
like the app.
Yeah, like BetterHelp.
Yeah, great app.
Yeah.
Amazing app, especially for people that are in like rural areas that their only psychiatrist or therapist within that area is the bartender. You
Right.
know, it's a great thing to have for sure. It's a great tool.
Yeah.
But let's talk about you, because you're here and this is supposed to be all about you. So if you had to give the Coles Notes tweet style or excretion style version of your story, what would it be?
All right. So, let's see. So basically, I went through abuse as a young child, and then we moved around a lot whenever I was a kid. And so to fit in, I started drinking and smoking at a young age. And that eventually turned into doing pills and doing harder things because, you know, even though people say it's not a gateway drug, weed isn't a gateway drug. It really was for me. The people who were doing that, they were also into the harder things. So I started doing that. And then around 18, I met a guy and he was doing even harder stuff. He was doing some heavier pills and it just kept spiraling out of control. I ended up doing heroin and I had my son at 21. So I had him for about 6 months and then I lost custody of him. And from there, I really spiraled out of control. I was homeless. I was a prostitute. I went to 26 rehabs and I overdosed 12 times just in like a 5-year span.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I really tried. I kept trying. Like I failed, but I kept getting up and I kept getting up because I would see my son, man. I mean, I would see him and I think that's the only thing that kept me going, honestly, because I kept trying to get better and trying, but it was just so hard to think of the responsibilities, like having to learn everything all over again was really hard for me. So anyway, I ended up getting arrested. And right before I did, there was like, I will never forget this. So 2 weeks before I got arrested, I got down on my knees and I said, I hated God before this. Like I could not, you know, I thought that he was the reason for everything I went through. And so I got down on my knees and I said, if you are real, then you can prove yourself to me and you can get me out of this mess. Like I've tried everything and nothing works. If you're real, help me. And 2 weeks later, I went to jail. And my probation officer was like, so I have an option for you to get out. You can go to a faith-based rehab. And I was so mad about it, but I did. I went. It was better than jail, right? And so I went and I have been sober ever since.
Wow. Okay. There's a few things to unpack there. Okay. So where do I start with this? Okay. So, cigarettes and marijuana and drinking kind of the start of it all, right?
Right.
What was the
12.
first?
So I think I started smoking cigarettes and then it went to alcohol and then it went to weed around like between 12, 13.
Do you, it's just a personal question, an aside, we'll call it. Do you understand why cigarettes are legal?
Why?
Well, I don't understand. Like I don't get it. I don't really.
I don't either.
Almost every addiction story I've ever heard on this podcast or in life in general starts with cigarettes.
Wow. I know, right? That is so true. Everybody, I mean, that was the hardest thing I've ever quit in my entire life, was smoking cigarettes. It was.
Well, they're actually engineered
Right.
to take your life and
Yeah.
to do it in the quickest way possible.
Yeah.
And I just don't really understand. Like we have so many restrictions around, well, I guess, a lot of things, they've been trying to loosen things up as we go along, but the one thing that should have been regulated the most was regulated the least. And the things that were, like, for example, weed has a lot of benefits for a lot of people. I
Right.
can't think of one single benefit. And alcohol too, if you have it in moderation. Like, I don't drink myself, but if you have it in moderation, you can enjoy life on it. It can be a fine complement to your life. There's actually some health benefits to red wine and all that.
Right. Yeah.
Can't think of a single benefit of cigarettes, but
Yeah.
here we are, and
Right.
they're so
Exactly.
common.
Well, they say that it'll calm you down, but I'm telling you, since I quit smoking, I have less anxiety. So it's like I don't know. That's why I said I'm going to go smoke so I can go calm down, right? But really, it just made me even more anxious. So yeah,
I don't know if I buy that. I think it might just be like almost like a placebo,
right?
or a very short. It's kind of like caffeine. It's a very short term fix to a problem.
Yeah,
But the problem doesn't go away. It's
right.
almost like Tylenol. Tylenol cuts off your receptors so you can't feel the pain, but the pain's still there, and it's
You wake
just
up the next morning like
exactly. So okay, so start with cigarettes, go to alcohol, go to weed. Here's an interesting. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions that I've asked myself a million times when I hear
Yeah.
people tell their story. Were you not aware, or were you not able to compute how bad this stuff was for you?
You want to know something really strange? This is probably an answer you'll never hear or you've never heard, but I had a pretty decent childhood. I mean, I know I had abuse. Like my stepmom abused me whenever I was like 3 to 9, and she was actually a pediatrician. She had like even held a curling iron to my head, and I have a big burn scar that I had to have surgery for. But anyways, I had abuse and a few different things go on. But my mom, like I was well cared for and I had a loving home. So I'm getting to my point.
Yeah, I'm
So,
trying to reconcile the two. We're going to come back to
so I
this.
had a loving home. Okay. What I'm saying is that I craved that bad lifestyle. Like I didn't have any reason to go into it. Like I craved the negative impacts. Do you remember the movie 13?
Yeah, of course.
Yes. I wanted to be that girl. I have no idea why. Maybe it was attention, probably, most likely. Attention and, just wanted to be bad, I guess. And I thought that I was the coolest thing ever whenever I was being bad or following that bad crowd. Does that answer your question? Not
Well, it
really.
brings up a lot more questions, which is good. Okay, so you said from about 3 to 9, you went through all this abuse, got burns in your head and everything. And then you said, but I had a pretty good childhood. So
yeah. That was on the weekends, and I was with my mom like on the weekdays. And whenever I think of my childhood, I see it as a good childhood, I guess. And I try to block out the bad memories. I don't know.
But that probably, I don't know if the good lifestyle is what led you to the bad. You know what I mean? Like, because you kind of said like you still envision as good, so that's what led you to being bad. It was kind of like almost like a rebellious thing to do.
Right. Maybe.
But don't you think you were more rebelling against the bad? I mean, that stuff could can and probably did stick with you.
Yeah, maybe.
A little numbing the pain.
Maybe. Yeah. And I you know what it was? I felt so much more confident whenever I was drinking and smoking. I felt confident. Like I felt comfortable to be myself, and I didn't feel the judgment. And that might be from the trauma from where I went through that abuse. Is I felt she didn't just physically abuse me, she also like emotionally and mentally abused me. And so the thought, she would tell me that I was ugly, she would tell me that I was stupid and things like that. And so maybe that was a gosh, you're like making me think about this. And I was like, I'm going to school to be a therapist. Like, why haven't I? So
you have enough of these conversations, you learn what questions to ask, right?
Yeah. So yeah, maybe that's what it was. I used because it made me feel more confident. I was extremely insecure at that age. I mean, I feel like a lot of teenagers are insecure at that age. They're trying to figure out who they are too, though, you know?
Oh, I didn't figure it out until like 5 years ago. So
Right. I'm
I
still.
yeah, I don't know if anybody ever I think people put on an air that they figure out who they are and what their life is about and everything. But I mean, the number of I have this thing because I'm a writer. I love to write, so I always say that I'm writing my life script, and I'm on chapter 14 of my life script. And when I have conversations with people about their life script, I feel kind of there's two things that I find so strange when people say I'm on chapter 1 and I'm not going anywhere, and that they don't have an inner monologue. And those two things always boggle my mind to no end. You're obviously on chapter like 384 of your life story, so of your life script. So going back to the childhood stuff, did you ever have a conversation with her like in adult life about what was her reasoning for being so abusive?
So whenever I was 16, actually, because my mom got full custody of me back when I was about 9. Like, she fought the court to get custody back of me. But anyway, my dad had wanted to bring me to Myrtle Beach for like a little summer trip whenever I was 16. And she was there, and we were sitting there alone together by the pool. And I said, you know what? In my mind, I'm like, I just want to have a relationship with my dad again. And so I told her that I forgave her. I said, I forgive you for everything that you've ever done to me. Like, I just want it to be water under the bridge. Like, let's just get along so I can spend more time with my dad. And this woman looked at me and she said, I never touched you. Your mom brainwashed you. I never hurt you. And I'm like, like that paralyzed mad, like where you're just like, you're like paralyzed for a second.
Oh, I know.
And then I picked up the lawn chair and I started hitting her with it. And my dad took me home.
Wow. Okay. That's a good turn. Plot twist.
Yeah.
So she's in total denial over what she did to you.
Yeah.
See, that's becoming a big theme in the world these days, is denial of reality.
Mm-hmm.
I find there's two, I hate the expression, there's two kinds of people, but there really are these days. And that's the people that embrace the reality, learn from it, grow from it, and move on. And then there's the people, and unfortunately there's a lot more of them than I think we would care to admit to ourselves, right, that deny reality. And they get through life by pretending that they're the hero of the story when they're actually the villain.
That's a good outlook. That's really good.
Yeah, and she definitely sounds like the latter for sure.
Yeah.
So I guess, where was your dad from 3 to 9?
He was working a lot and he didn't want to believe, like, we have a really good relationship now. We don't really talk about what happened yet. Like, we haven't got there yet, but we are, like, he calls me every Sunday and we're working towards it. He was in addiction also, and he got sober like 10, 15 years ago. So, he kind of like, I think he like stuck his head in the sand. He's like, that didn't happen. Like, I can't believe she was a pediatrician, dude. Like, she would have lost her job. I don't know. Eventually I'll talk to him about it, but he worked all the time, and I was with her most of the time.
So I had a guy named Jeffrey Deskovic on the show once, and he was wrongfully convicted of rape and murder when he was 16. He was imprisoned. He finally got cleared, got out of jail, became a lawyer. Now he gets other people wrongfully convicted out of jail. And he had closure, and even he found it hard to move on from the circumstance which he found himself. Now, admittedly, that's a very horrible circumstance to find yourself in.
God.
But so is yours. I mean, not to diminish yours. So you
No.
haven't really been able to get closure on it yet, it sounds like. Because I mean, you haven't, she denied it. You and your dad haven't talked about it. Was there something with your mom that allowed you to? Because I'm trying to figure out how, I'm trying to figure out, you know, a lot of bad came after it for sure, which we'll talk about. But I'm trying to figure out how you are on the road you're on now without that closure. Did your mom do something? Like, how did you, what was the kind of like what gave you the ability to move on?
So this is probably going to sound strange, but I forgive, and a lot of people have taken advantage of this, but I forgive people very easy. The person that I struggle forgiving is myself. And even though I had no part in that, somehow I just have the ability to just forgive and let go easy. I don't know what it is. It's just, that's how I've always been. So there's nothing I can do about it. So, I mean, there's really nothing. I mean, I could go beat her up if I wanted to, but what's that going to do? It's not going to change what happened.
Yeah.
You know, she is who she is, and she's the one who has to live with it. I'm fine. I'm okay now. You know, I'm living my life, but she's the one who's living with it in her mind.
Wow. That's an interesting take, because most people can't do that. You understand how rare that is?
I no, I mean, I struggle with forgiving myself for things. And then I've done some bad stuff too, you know, but even growing up, I've always been like that. I just have.
So now getting out of the childhood trauma and going into everything else that you went through, what was it? Was it purely just because you felt comfortable being bad, or was it self-hatred, or was it coping with your past, or why do you think you just continued to descend for as long as you did?
Good question. Honestly, once I had like done it for so long, and I had lost everything, the main reason why addicts struggle to get sober is because the road ahead seems so much scarier than staying on the streets and staying in the chaos, because they're comfortable in the chaos because it's comfortable. But for me, I'm like, how am I, like, I would look at normal people and I'd be like, how do they function? Like, how do they wake up and do dishes and laundry and like take care of their kids? I don't understand. And so the thought of restarting my life over was just much scarier than living on the streets and doing what I needed to do for drugs, I guess.
Okay, I can see that. I get that. Like, it's I was an entrepreneur until April. Well, I guess I'm still technically an entrepreneur, but I had a company until April, and I got very sick, and in January, so I ended up closing all that out. And now it's kind of funny because I just went on a trip with my girlfriend, and we went and we spent some time with with friends who their level of success is miles above what most people are willing to dream. And Eric asked me, he said, how do you feel now? Because it was a very long road to recovery, and I'm still recovering, but I'm much better now than I was. And I said, I lived inside of the stress of that environment for so many years that I didn't recognize how bad it was anymore. And that's ultimately what made me sick, was the stress.
Wow.
And so, I said to him, I don't know how we get so comfortable with bad, but we do. Yeah. And it takes something really crazy, something just out of this world to get us, to shake us out of that. Yeah. And, now that I'm out of it, I never want to have 44 staff again. Like that just, and if I do, I need an HR manager. Like that's just the way. Right. And like all the things that come with a business like that, I never want to do that again, because it's just, I can't even imagine the number of years I took off my life living that life.
It's a
So for
lot. It
Yeah,
is.
so for me, the thing, the big switching point was getting sick and being forced out of it, so that I
Mhm.
would then go, oh, that's what I was doing wrong. Um, what was Because we're gonna come back into the next episode after this, and we'll get into like the details of your 5 better moments. But what was the better moment that like stopped it all? Was it just being sent to that faith-based rehab center? That what did it, or was there a moment within there that finally cracked the code and got you to be better?
Um, it was a combination of things. Whenever I went to jail, I was so relieved because, I'd been homeless for so long, that I knew that I would have shelter. I knew I would have food. I knew I had water, like clean water. I could take a shower. It was the little things, and I was relieved to go to jail. And then after I was there for a while, I was like, I feel okay. Like I don't need drugs in the morning. Like I actually feel okay. I feel normal. Like I want to clean. And then it was whenever my probation officer was like, you can go to this rehab or you can finish out your 15-year sentence. Which one is it? And I was like, okay, let's go. Like I'm like, I don't care what it is, I'll go. And as soon as I walked in those doors, I was 98 pounds soaking wet, which I'm like 140 now. And I was just all my dignity was gone, everything was gone, but all of the women that were there came and they greeted me with peach cobbler and like a bunch of hugs. And I
Oh,
felt extremely loved at that moment. I felt seen and understood. And I just started to listen to the people talk, and I felt like it was possible for me. And they told me they would help me get on my feet, that they would help me get a job, they would help me get a place and get my son back and get my charges removed. Like all of these things, I got to a place where I felt like it was possible that I could take on all the responsibilities again, and I did it.
wow. Okay. So I'm not a particularly religious person.
That's
Um,
fine.
I don't not believe. I just, I heard a line in Da Vinci Code. It was really interesting because on Halloween, my girlfriend and I were on Fremont Street in Vegas,
Oh,
where you can meet any kind of person. All types of people are there.
yeah.
And we ended up, my girlfriend ended up befriending this woman who started to dive into her faith a little bit. And
Mhm.
I had heard the Tom Hanks line from the movie Da Vinci Code, and I was like, I wonder if I'll ever use that, because it always stuck with me. I finally did, and I said to her, "Faith is a gift I've yet to receive."
Mm,
And I think it's such a great line because it doesn't belittle somebody's faith. I
right.
remember because I went to church when I was younger. It was more
Yeah.
to because I had a crush on a girl that went to church, to be honest. Um, but I went to church, didn't really understand what I was doing there, didn't really like it, found a lot of the people creepy. And then the pastor ended up getting charges for molestation, which that's
Secures it, yeah.
yeah. And then I read all, and then as I was getting better, as I was trying to like tap into new electronic fields of my new electromagnetic fields of my brain, I read every religious text imaginable.
Yeah.
And it 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 the way I look at religion is exactly the way you just said it. Is I don't care what the community is. If the community makes you feel like you belong, like you're loved, like you have a place, like you have a purpose, like you have a mission, whatever that looks like for you, then
Mhm.
great.
Yeah.
Right? As long as that mission isn't to go out and slaughter an entire group of people, I think
Right.
yeah, as long as you're not creating victims. But how was that your first experience with religion? Was at that faith-based
Well,
rehab?
no, I had my family was Christian, and they read the Bible and stuff, but I had went to a bunch of churches whenever I was uh, on drugs, and everybody would shun me. They'd look, they'd ask me to leave.
Mm.
And so I judged God through people, and that was my problem.
Okay, so now how much is your faith part of your daily life now?
Every day.
Every day. So
Yeah.
you're a full on believer.
Yeah, but I don't go to church. I don't like I don't like the churches. Everywhere I go, I just don't feel welcomed. It's just not it's not, you know, I have my own relationship with God, and I'm doing just fine.
I wonder what makes the difference between the people, the religious folk at the rehab center versus the religious folk at church. What is the why did you get along with them so well, but then when you go to church you find you don't get along with other Christians? What's going on there?
So anytime so there's only very few churches near me. We're in a really small town in Georgia. But the one that I tried to go to, I started to tell they asked me to introduce myself. And so I didn't get into details. Like I didn't say I was a prostitute or anything in front of these, this women's group, but I started like, I have 7 years sober, blah, blah, blah. And they said, let's not talk about that here. Let's not talk about that. And I'm like, okay, like bye. Like
yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to tell you what God did for me and you asked me to leave. So I just haven't found a place where I feel that welcome like I did. Like I don't expect them to be like peach cobbler again, right?
Yeah.
And like big hugs. Like that's not what I expect, but like man, like say hi, like open the door like a lot of other churches do and just make you feel welcome. Maybe I'm just being a prude. I don't know.
No, I mean, I get it. Like I obviously, like I said, I'm not religious. I don't go to church.
Yeah. Right.
But
I don't blame you.
But I feel like, it's interesting. You have the big debate about whether being religious makes you a good person or not. And all these sorts of people say, without faith, you can't be good. And I just definitely don't agree with that.
I don't either.
Obviously, I'm a little biased. But that's very counterintuitive to the teachings of Jesus Christ to say, oh, no, you can't talk about your relationship with God. It has to be what we feel is okay.
Yeah.
I wonder if they understand what they're doing to people when they do that.
I don't know. It's like, I don't know. I mean, you would think they would. And like the topic of discussion for that day, like centered around like love and loving those and like not judging people. And it's just like, so you're teaching it just to teach it to put on this show. That's what I think Christianity has become. And there's a lot of Christians who play Christian just because they have to portray this image to keep themselves looking all godly. But in all reality, Jesus would flip tables in their church if he came down here.
That is an amazing visual. And I hope somebody watches this and makes an AI version of that. Yeah, I guess, that's an interesting relationship you have with faith then, because it saved you while also shunning you. You're able to maintain it through the shunning. So you have a more intimate relationship with God, not so much like here's what I do every Sunday and let's take photos of me praying at the altar for Instagram and all that. Yours is more about your direct one-on-one conversation.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'll try to, incorporate it with the kids. I'll be like, oh, look what Jesus made or something like that, but it's not for show. It's just not, I believe in loving people. You love people. Just like I said, I judged God through people for a really long time. Yeah. And that's what a lot of people do. Nobody's going to pick up a Bible. They're going to look at Christians and then look at I'm not saying every Christian is like that. So if anybody's listening, right. I mean, but it's sad. It's very, very sad to me.
Yeah, it sucks because no matter what, if it's a religious, whether it's Christianity, Catholicism, any Buddhism, all that, or whether it's just a community of people, let's say a bunch of agnostic and atheists or whatever. The whole point of, and I found that people really struggle with the concept of community since like 2020.
Yeah.
You know, where community used to be, you know, they say it takes a village to raise a child, but now everybody's kind of keeping to themselves. And if you come in and you're like a little different, just a little different than everybody else, you're shunned out of the community. And, you know, people talk a lot about, you know, it's been a big popular topic in the US the last couple of years, is to, you know, the absence of faith in society being the most detrimental part of society. And I just think it's no matter what the community is, as long as it's for positive ends, I think that's probably the biggest problem we have, is the lack of community and the lack of saying to someone, hey, we recognize you're different. We see that, you know, you've got cultural differences, lifestyle differences, whatever, but you're good peeps. So we're cool. You know,
that's so funny. I just made a Facebook post about this. Like, I was like, there's so much hatred going on right now. But if we've got to come together. It doesn't matter what race, who you voted for, what, you know, what religion, what gender, it doesn't matter. We've got to love each other and come together. But instead, it's like division is being created everywhere. And it's really sad.
Yeah, it is. I especially for someone in your situation, because you know, let's end it here. Let's with this question. So, how tenuous is your recovery? I'll give you a good example. So, I'm gonna get hate mail for the people busting my balls over this again every time I bring this up. So I watch General Hospital with my mother. Okay.
Yeah.
And there is a storyline going on right now about a character that's been on the show for like 20 years, just died of a heart attack out of nowhere, very unexpected. So, you know, you watch someone for 20 years and you kind of feel like that character is part of your family, right? And two things have come out of that. One, the guy who her boyfriend proposed to her in the hospital bed when he thought she was okay, and then she died right after. So his portrayal of grieving the person he loves has really kind of like made me think over the last 24 hours or 48 hours. But the other thing that came of it, her mom is recovering alcoholic twice over. And her sponsor, one of her sponsor, came over to her house as soon as he heard about the fact that her daughter died. And he said, you know, I know you don't feel like probably going to a meeting right now, so I'm bringing the meeting to you. You know, how are you feeling? And she said, I really love the way they wrote this. I'm a big fan of good writing. And that show has a wave of good and a wave of bad writing. Literally within 2 scenes, there's great and the worst writing you've ever seen. But she said, I now am at the point in my life where I understand that if I were to pick up a glass of alcohol right now, that I'd be disrespecting her memory. And it doesn't even enter my mind that that's a possibility for me anymore. So
wow,
it's kind of a long way of saying, are you at that point where it's like you feel like nothing can break you no matter what happens? Or do you still struggle with the ability to stay sober and on the right path? On the better path.
Right, on the better path. Yeah, so I have no cravings anymore. I've come so far. I have both my kids with me. I am married. We own a home. Like, I will tell you that there are 2 things that have kept me sober, and I've already said one, God. And then there's who I choose to surround myself with. Not who I surround myself with, but who I choose to surround myself with. So though I don't crave anything, if it were placed in front of me every single day for maybe like 2 weeks, one day I'll have a bad day, I would end up using. I would, because it's even though I have 7 years sober, I would. It's something that I will have to watch for the rest of my life. And even drinking, like, I thought I could be a normal person and drink whenever, you know, I first got sober. And like 1 glass of wine turned into 2 bottles of wine in a matter of days. So it's not just heroin and meth, it's everything. I have to watch everything.
So you have, it's a constant battle for you then. If when the going gets tough, that urge starts to kick in to fall back into bad habits.
Well, not necessarily. I don't necessarily, like, I haven't drank for 6 years. I haven't, done anything for a really, really long time, since 7 years. So not that I want to, but if it were placed in front of me, that's whenever I'd probably relapse.
So you wouldn't consciously go seek out a bar.
No.
But if somebody picked you up by the back of your pants and your hair and threw you into a bar,
No,
that would be problematic.
No. Well, I mean, if they did that for like 2 weeks in a row, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
If it's in front of me over and over and over again, any addict, yeah. It's hard.
That's interesting. Okay. So you think that's a story for any addict, pretty much?
That you've met. What I've saw, yeah. From what I've always witnessed, yeah.
Man, that's a lifelong struggle. I don't know if I don't have addictive personality. I've never really been it. The only thing I've really ever been addicted to is adrenaline. Mm-hmm. And I've had to, that's been the hardest part of this year, not doing anything crazy. And I just I can't even understand. And that's where we'll leave it, because I'd like to come back. I like to try to understand what that's like to live with that. So just so everybody knows, this is part 1 of this interview with Mariah, and we're going to get into part 2 on the next episode. You're definitely going to want to watch it. I'm going to go through her, or listen, however you're doing it. I'm going to go through her 5 better moments. So just to give you a little preview, her 5 better moments: losing custody of her son due to addiction, losing a job, and couldn't support the habit, after she got arrested, after she graduated her 27th rehab. Oh my God. I don't think I've had anything that I've done 27 times. And that's dedication. And after Mariah started school and her business. So we're gonna get into those, and I mean, I feel like this could be a 10-parter, but it's a 2-parter, and I'll get to as much of it as I can, and then maybe at a future date we'll have to have her back, because I just don't feel like we can get through it all. And on that note, that is the episode. Comments, shares, all that sort of stuff. Love it all, do it all, appreciate it all. And a couple of people asked if I'm going to get a Patreon up soon. Not yet. I don't feel like we're there yet, but soonish, we'll say. I would love for people to support the show and to get people on the show. That's going to be a big piece of it, I think. Getting Patreons on the show who have gone through struggles to be better. And it doesn't have to be as grand on scale as Mariah's story, but like I've talked about, being a better boyfriend, being a better business person. We've dived into making elections better. We've dived into very small and very large topics, right? So anything will work, but not yet. So for those of you asking, not yet on that. But betterpodcast.live, that's all of our links. You can go there and you can find any information you need about us. Please subscribe. Our subscribe numbers allow our podcast to be seen by more and more people. Okay, I'll be back with Mariah on part 2 later. Thanks for checking out Better. If you got to the end, it must mean you liked the episode, right? So how about 5 stars? Maybe a sub, maybe a share. Great universal comment points. And good luck on your better journey.